Alright everybody, welcome back. This is a POV GoPro head mount flight that I took back in 2019 that I thought I would narrate for you here. So I'm just getting the headset put on, getting the harness put on, wired and strapped, and this is just a quick hop empty, no passengers, Part 91, single pilot, just me in the airplane from OJC, which is the Johnson County Executive Airport in Olathe, Kansas, just outside of Kansas City, over to Topeka Regional. And I'm just repositioning the airplane empty after some maintenance, so I thought I would take you along for this one. Nice day in October back in 2019. And I've got the GPU on the airplane, so you can see I've already got the avionics pre-programmed. I'm just running through the before start checklist there, omitting the first flight of the day items because I had flown previously, so just making sure I didn't miss anything on my flows. Turning on the beacon there and giving the start signal and just clearing the area around the propeller, and here comes the start. So this was a cold start, I think, so I didn't need to motor the engine or the ITT down at all. So here I'm just protecting for a hot start. I'm watching the ITT for a hot start, NG for a hung start, watching the oil pressure develop, torque. Just ready to interrupt things if there should be a problem. Engine start sounds really good in the PC-12. It's nice being that close to the PT-6 up there. So here I'm turning on the generators. The avionics are already on, of course. Standby bus off, ECS auto, flaps 15, turning on the cooling system there. Resetting the master warning and giving the disconnect for the GPU. And checking the flight controls here, free and correct. And running through, of course, the after start checklist, resetting the fuel totalizer there. So no matter how well you know the airplane, it's always a good idea to use the checklist just to make sure you didn't miss anything. Even if you know the airplane very well, you will occasionally miss things. We are humans, so you want to always run that checklist every time. So I'm just running through that, and here in just a second I'll run the power up a little bit and we'll perform the pusher test, which is required before every flight to clear the caution there for the pusher. Of course, we want to make sure that pusher works because the PC-12 does not have favorable stalling characteristics. It's not an airplane that you really want to stall, especially close to the ground. So there you can see the shaker shaking. There's the pusher. Just making sure I can interrupt that with that red button that you see my thumb on. So that was a successful pusher test. Parking brake off, flash the taxi light to let my marshal out there know I'm ready to move. And he will marshal me out of my parking spot there, and away we go. So just applying some breakaway power, doesn't take much. Give him the wave, and primarily controlling the speed with beta, and you don't want to ride the brakes. So there's really not much reason to use the brakes in the PC-12 unless you're on a very short field. Or just, of course, for tight cornering when you're taxiing, but generally speaking, you can use the beta to control the speed very well. So there was some construction going on this day at OJC. I think back in 2019 they resurfaced a portion of the runway, the north portion of 1836, so they actually have that closed, and the east parallel taxiway they're using as the runway, which they have set up as 1735. So it is shortened. So I think on this day I used the short field procedure, so I used flaps 30 and then held the brakes for the power run up, but we'll find out here soon when I get over there. So I'm going to make this left turn across the closed runway here, just being mindful that I do have a lot of equipment and personnel working around the area, so just going nice and slow, making sure I don't mow anybody down. And then I've already gotten my back taxi instructions here, so I'm just turning on all the external lights, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on the probe heat, windshield heat there, so I'm ready for an immediate takeoff, clearing right and left. And I'm actually following that piston twin up there. He'll need a run up and I will not, so he'll make a right turn off the runway, do his run up, and I'll just turn around and get out ahead of him here. TCAS to TA. And just making sure I've got everything cocked, locked, and ready to rock. So I'm going to run through that before takeoff checklist in a second. I'll just need to set my heading bug for the initial heading the tower assigns after departure, which is normally 210 if you're heading over to the west, like I am on this day. So here's the before takeoff checklist. Just making sure the lights and the heats are on. There we go, rolling that heading bug around to 210. So I'll just make a slight right turn here and then hook around to the left, and you can see the PC-12 does corner very nicely. It's easy to make these tight turns on the airplane, which is always fun. There's the big 1.7. So I will hold the brakes here, like I said, and use the short field technique. So condition lever goes to flight idle. Ease the power up onto the governor here. One last check to make sure I didn't miss anything, and then run the power up, release the brakes. Checking to make sure we've got maximum torque, the ITT's within limits, and off we go. Airspeed's alive. It does not take long to get to a rotation speed in the PC-12. Rotate right there on the brakes. Gear up. Yaw amp. Taxi landing lights off. Pitching for VY about 120. Up and away. I don't have much fuel for this short leg. It's only a 20-minute hop and I'm empty, so I'm climbing quite well, which is always fun. So at this airport, it's straight ahead to 500 feet for noise abatement and then turn on course. So here I'm in that right-hand turn to 210. Just changed frequencies over to departure, checking on with them. Still hand flying. Nice smooth day here. And I think I'm climbing to 3,000, so leaving 1,000 AGL is a good time to set your torque to climb power, max continuous power, which is 36.9 psi. There was an ident on the transponder there. 36.9 psi is max continuous torque, or the top of the green arc, and now I'm transitioning over to a cruise climb, 150 knots, and just getting it trimmed out. And it looks like I'm probably setting the autopilot there, maybe. And just kind of running through a quick after takeoff flow. I'll back that up with the checklist when I get a chance. Here it comes. So they've got me on a 210 heading to get me out around the New Century Class Delta surface area, which is over to the west. And then they'll probably get me on course direct to Topeka. So I only climbed up to 6,000 on this day, but I am still monitoring the pressurization. You just want to make sure the differential pressure is climbing and that the cabin altitude does not match the aircraft altitude. Now, if you're only climbing up to 6,000 feet, you don't need the pressurization, but it's still good operating practice to be in the habit of checking it, because on most flights in the PC-12 you are climbing up into the flight levels, and it's good to know about a pressurization issue before you get too high. So there I just entered direct to Topeka Regional there, went into nav mode on the autopilot, rolled the heading bug over to align with that course, and we're on the right turn direct to Topeka. At 150 knots, climbing up to 6 here. Doesn't take long to get up there. And I'm already getting the ATIS for Topeka Regional because it is a short leg, so I want to get that squared away, get the altimeter set, get the approach planning done. All that jazz pretty quickly here. So I'm just setting in my descent planning there into the GTN 650. This is, I think, a 2003 Series 10 Legacy. Really nice airplane with the GTN 650, 750 retrofits. Really nice panel. The standard EIS and the King MFD below the 750 there on the right that I leave on the TCAS or the weather radar if there's weather out there. But on a nice day like today, clearing a million, I just leave the traffic display on there with the TCAS. So here we're leveling off at 6,000, just letting the airspeed build. And at this low of an altitude, you will torque out before you temp out, so I'm just riding that maximum torque, 36.9 psi, and just making sure the ITT stays within limits. 720 for climb and 685, maybe a little bit more is a good rule of thumb for cruise. And we're well below that, I'm sure, at 6,000 feet. Here I'm programming in the RNAV 2.1. Even though I'm planning a visual approach, it's still a good idea to back the visual approach up with an instrument approach procedure just to make sure that you're aligned with the runway that you think you are at the correct airport and to get that vertical guidance. So I'm just running through the cruise checklist here. And what a nice day to fly. Not even so much as a bump. So now we're just cruising. enjoying the scenery there. Not a whole lot to look at in this part of the country out in Kansas, but it's got a beauty of its own. Nice and flat out there. A lot of farmland. So at this point I've probably got the avionics set up for the approach. I've briefed the approach, not a whole lot to brief again on a day like this, pretty much just a modified straight into 2-1, then a right turn off the runway, flaps 30. But you still want to run through that quickly in your mind just to make sure your head is in the game before you get into the terminal area. So these short legs in the PC-12 can be a lot of fun because you don't have enough time to get bored. So especially there's the back, you can see I'm empty there. Nice cabin, executive seating configuration like most of them have. When you're up in the flight levels on 2 or 3 hour legs, especially over the Midwest where there's not a lot to look at, it can get a little boring. There's the iPad with ForeFlight. I like to leave that scratch pad out just to copy clearances, and if you get a reroute or something, it's nice to have that available to jot that down. Yeah, on these shorter legs, you don't really have enough time to get bored, so it's fun. It's a little bit more entertaining when you fly out over the West Coast. There's a little bit more scenery to look at, but I'm always just happy to be in the airplane. Any day that I'm flying is a good day. So, before too long here, we'll start down. That's Hillsdale Lake off the left side there. You can see all that nice farmland with the section lines out there, northeast Kansas, in all of its glory. On longer legs, I'll have the Sirius XM satellite radio playing in the headset, which is really nice to have. And this route will take you south of Lawrence, which is where the University of Kansas is, KU. Lawrence is a small college town out west of Kansas City, kind of off in that direction right there, actually. Lawrence Municipal Airport is just right over that way. So just monitoring systems. Again, not a whole lot to do. The hard work is over with until the approach and landing. And this is just such a nice airplane to fly. So here in just a minute, they'll ship me over to Kansas City Center, which provides the approach control services for Topeka Regional. And I'll check on with them and let them know I'm at 6,000 with information, whatever the ATIS code is. I've already got the airport in sight, at least in the video here. I don't know if I saw it on that day, but it's nice and clear. I can actually see it up there on the horizon. If you look closely, you can see it there. So I should get cleared for the visual approach pretty far out, probably, if there's not other traffic. I want to say that's Perry Lake maybe on the nose there. Don't quote me on that. So again, this is October, so it's probably nice and cool outside. Probably did not need the VCCS or the air conditioning system this day. On hot days, it can take a little while to cool the cabin down in the PC-12. I think they fixed that in the NGX. People say good things about the air conditioning system in the NGX. I haven't gotten the chance to experience that yet, but glad to hear they fixed it. So there I'm just tuning in Kansas City Center. I'm setting tower in the standby because that'll be my next frequency. So this is definitely an easy leg, a low workload leg. You know, it's good weather, short leg, familiar airports. There's not a whole lot to do, but you still want to just maintain those operating practices of staying ahead of the airplane, you know, getting your frequencies pre-programmed, thinking ahead to the next step and, you know, the next step after that. So looks like I'm probably setting in either some descent planning numbers or activating the approach for the RNAV 2-1. So there I just went into heading mode on the autopilot, so I rolled that heading bug a little bit to the right to line up for the modified straight into 2-1. And if there's no other traffic, it's a good idea to intercept final at about a mile just to get nice and stabilized. You can do it closer in, but a mile gives you plenty of distance to get lined up and stabilized on final. And occasionally ATC will want you to line up farther out than a mile, but I think on this day there was really nobody else in the pattern, so I'm just kind of making a right turn there to get lined up for that. You can see I've activated the approach there on the EHSI. You can see the CDI deflected off there. And the VSI is showing about maybe 1,200 feet per minute, 1,500 feet per minute rate of descent, so down we go. And the airspeed indicator is pretty close to the red line there, which is where I like to keep it on a smooth day like this in the descent. So I'm just adjusting the power to maintain that red line, VMO, and going as fast as we can, because why not? So this is a Class Delta airport at Topeka Regional, so of course within 4 nautical miles below 2,500 feet AGL, which is generally speaking the confines of Class Delta airspace, you've got to be below 200 knots indicated airspeed. So I will start slowing down before too long so that I don't bust that speed limitation. But we can go fast until then. So just making some small adjustments on the heading bug there to get lined up where I want to be on that final to 2-1. Anytime I watch these videos back, it just makes me want to go fly. This is just such a fun airplane to fly. So it's not a problem to carry some extra speed like this into the terminal area in the PC-12 because it does slow down very, very well. Energy management is never a problem in the PC-12, so you definitely can carry some speed into the terminal area so long as there isn't too much traffic or a reason to slow down ahead of time. So there you can see I'm starting to slow down so that I don't exceed that speed limitation. Now, when you extend flaps from 0 to 15 degrees in the PC-12, it does take 22 seconds. So it takes a pretty long time to get that first stage of flaps out. So it's a good idea to do that at about 3 miles, sometimes even a little bit farther out depending on the situation. So I'll get those extended here before too long. 163 is VFE for flaps 15, and then the white arc for 30 and 40. So right there I've disconnected the autopilot, so I'm hand flying now. Probably getting those flaps in sometime right around there. I can't actually see the flap position indicator from this POV, but the flaps might already be extended. So I'm just getting it trimmed up nice and stabilized, adjusting the rudder trim there. So the yaw amp will stay on until short final, but the autopilot's disconnected. And again, it's a good idea to use an instrument approach even on a visual approach, just to make sure that you have the right runway ahead of you at the right airport, so it prevents those wrong surface events. And then it's nice to have the vertical guidance as well if that's available for the runway that you're using. So there's gear down, taxi landing lights on, so I'm cleared to land 2-1 at this point, and this airplane has the electro-hydraulic landing gear, so you can hear that loud hydraulic pump kick on. And there's 3 green, no red, always a good feeling. So again, just adjusting the rudder trim on the PCL there. I like to get it nice and trimmed up to where I can let go of the controls at any moment and the airplane stays right where I want it. So we're well within the white arc there. Flaps are set to 30. They indicate 30, I would imagine, at this point. And I'm just going to run through that before landing checklist to make sure I didn't miss anything. Sure we have about 0 differential on the pressurization. And again, just getting it trimmed up nice and stable. And I'll roll into line up just inside of a mile here shortly. So flaps 30 landings on the PC-12 are normal. Some people even like to land at flaps 15. Flaps 40 we really only use on short fields or unimproved runways, so flaps 30 is the standard flap setting for landing. So there's 2-1, getting lined up. And the approach speed in the PC-12 is quite low, usually around 80 knots, so it takes a while to get there. Things don't really happen too fast on approach in the PC-12, so I'm just putting that fast slow pointer there on the E80i right on the donut, which is about 1.3 times the stall speed. And down we go. Checking 3 green again, crossing the threshold, make sure I have gear beneath me. Ease the power out, give it a nice flare. Touchdown on the mains right there. Condition lever goes to ground idle. And I need to roll all the way up to that next taxiway on the right there, so I'm not using reverse and I'm not even using brakes. And really not even any beta at this point. I'll use a little bit of beta as I roll uphill here, but you really don't need to use brakes unless you're on a short field or unless you need to make a quick turn off in the PC-12. Really just using beta is all you need to do. So I'm just going to make this right turn off the runway here. We'll get cleaned up after landing, get my taxi instructions back into the ramp. We'll monitor the ground frequency on the way back in, so flaps up here. And then I will reach up, turn off the windshield and the probe heat, external lights except for the taxi, beacon, and nav lights, TCAS to standby. Reset to master caution, and I'm resetting all 3 trims to neutral. And that's your after landing flow. And then I'll back that up with the checklist here. And again, just controlling the taxi speed with beta, not with the brakes. And this is kind of a longer taxi in, so we do have to allow the engine 2 minutes to cool down so that we don't shock cool the hot section of the engine on shutdown. So you want to make sure you have 2 minutes that elapses between the time that you select condition lever to ground idle at minimum power to the time you shut the engine down. Definitely no problem to get here at Topeka Regional on this longer taxi in, but on short taxis sometimes you do have to wait a minute before you shut the engine down. Make sure you get that 2 minute cool down period in. So I'm just going to hang a left here and then make a right after the tower. This is a private hangar that I'm taxiing to, so just to protect the privacy of the company that used to manage this airplane, I have edited out some of the actual footage of the parking, but I will show you the shutdown procedure here. So there'll just be a little edit here in a few seconds, but I'm just going to make this right turn here onto this ramp area. Get parked. Nice quick flight. So I'm just starting to get things shut down there. Here comes that edit. And now we're parked. So avionics off, generators off, condition lever to feather cutoff, supplemental oxygen off, ECS off, taking off the harness, turning off the noise canceling, getting everything shut down. So I'll just make a note of the fuel burn here, and got the Choxin signal there, so parking brake release, so they can tow the airplane later. And most operators do want to keep track of their fuel burn per leg, so that's what I just wrote down there. I'll make a note of that in the log. Battery off, and I'll get out and go home. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you on the next one.